make sure they're all read because we don't
Yeah, you're fine.
I'm unmuted.
Take a breath. You're all right.
Okay, we'll call this meeting to order. We'll start with the invocation. Lord, watch over us, help us all to make correct decisions, and guide the Board of Public Works to do what Hannibal would like to see most. Thank you. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Okay. I don't see anybody's name written on the notepad. Anybody have anything to say before we move on? Okay. General Manager's report.
Okay. Well, thanks, Bill. We've actually got a full agenda today, and the one thing I was going to do is try to talk about some specific items that's either going to require board approval today or in the near future. But the first one I was going to start off with is Courtney has done a great job getting the board of calendar events put together for 2020 and 2021. So it's been updated. I'll give you some ideas so you guys can plan your vacations and events, with your family and stuff. So as you find out, being a volunteer is difficult, and balancing this with other duties can be very challenging. So we're trying to work ahead so you have all those items to be able to schedule and plan. And then the next item is actually the schedule rates and fees. We've been talking quite a bit through the budgeting process about the need for no rate increases, at least what we're forecasting for this next year. One other item we've been talking quite a bit about is changing the customer deposit policy, which would require a change in the schedule of rates and fees. And we're still kind of working on that to get that implemented. So we've kind of went back through and just wanted to make sure everything was up to date and current on the schedule of rates and fees. And, we probably need to do this annually anyway, especially a part of the budgeting process. And Paul's going to be giving an update on this item and really some of the items that's not really related to rates, but to just billable cost and some things like lab testing, services that we do provide the community, new connections to the system, probably needs to be updated and amended. And so that's one of those things that would actually require a public hearing at some point. So a good thing for the customers because it's really kind of specific to the services that's being provided. So obviously the more accurate those fees are, the more accurate the rates will be. So that's something he'll be updating everybody on. But really on that, it's actually just getting the public hearing scheduled in the near future. And kind of a part of that, APPA is actually doing a rates and cost of service seminar this summer. Be a great opportunity for the board to maybe have some education on cost of service and rate development. It's targeted towards policymakers, so you give you a really good background, and Courtney's got all that information. He'll be providing it to you, and so you'll be able to put that on your calendar as well. But heard really good things about the seminar and training, and it's virtual, so it'll be a nice thing to maybe go on the schedule and have everybody attend. Today, we've actually been talking a little bit about the AMI project. It's one of the bigger initiatives we've got going on in the budget this next year. We talked last month about how about 25% of the electric and water meters have been changed out. This is going to create some really significant values for the system as well as for the customers. And Matthew will be giving an update on it. But really, as you kind of talk about rate development, fees, structures, time of use rates, curtailable rates, peak, off-peak, some of those things that might actually really, really help economic development. And we've visited with Corey and some of this, on these items, and it's definitely something that a lot of utilities are moving towards. So it may be something that in the future, you might want to make sure that the cost is correct and be able to adjust those rates that might be attractive for future businesses and without adversely impacting any other customer group, which is always a challenge of trying to attract economic and low growth for the system without really making sure your cost of service for each customer class is being done appropriately. One item that we've really been working quite a bit on, and it's 99% complete, is the construction agreement with Ameren. And kind of updated the board quite a bit on this. But as everybody knows, Ameren's actually got about $1.3 billion worth of projects that they've gotten approved within the MISO footprint. The project we've been talking about for the radio line to come into Hannibal's a smaller portion of that. but it's definitely a good opportunity to take advantage of and would be a great benefit for the community. We've got some aging infrastructure out there that was constructed in the mid-'70s. Most of that's 34.5 capabilities. We'll be able to retire one line and then convert one 34.5 line to 161 line coming in from their new substation. And the one thing we've been trying to get ironed out, which like I said, we're really, really close. We're all in agreement on all the terms and conditions of it. It's just a matter of getting the language correct. So that language has actually went back to Ameren's attorneys, and I haven't seen it here recently, but it's just kind of, matter of fact, of just defining responsibilities and ownership. And the one thing about the construction agreement is that it really is talking about construction responsibilities and who will be performing what duties. And sometimes that can get confusing with who actually owns the assets. So Ameren's actually went through their first approval process with their board, and they've been authorized to continue on with the engineering and design, which includes the necessary authorization for funding for that portion. June 16th, they're actually going to go back for another approval process where their board's going to review the overall funding authorization for the entire project. And so what they really would like to have done is an executed agreement with HPPW for our portion that we would actually be paying them to construct. And so Ameren's actually started procuring some materials, transformers, getting ready to award some of their construction agreements in June, July. They've went out for bid, and most of the bids have come back in within the engineering estimates, so everything's looking good on that front. But what the construction agreement's going to define is what we get for about $1,039,000. They're actually going to be constructing 6 facilities that we'll ultimately own. They'll transfer ownership to us for those 6 facilities, and then we'll actually have a joint use kind of shared facility agreement as well. That's 90% complete for the conductor that's going to be attached to their facilities coming into Hannibal. So the 74 line that's currently in place is about 1.9 miles. This new line that'll come from Finn that will dead end where the 74 line currently is about 1.4 miles. So board's kind of forwarded that agreement onto you, and I don't know if you had a chance to review it, but really all the details are worked out, just kind of finalizing the language, but I do not have the final agreement today. So we'll be kind of talking about that in new business items. The joint use and shared facilities agreement that I referenced, that's 90% complete, actually defines maintenance responsibilities and the process for outage coordination and access rights to the structure so we can maintain those facilities. The one thing that's a major benefit about this construction agreement is that when they move the fee that we currently have for Marion to the new Finn substation, we will actually be eliminating about $400,000 of annual cost for wholesale distribution services. So a really good project from an economic standpoint. And with it going to a 161 feed for the city of Hannibal, it actually increases reliability and resiliency on the line. And like I said, allows us to retire, replace some aging infrastructure, and really expands capacity for the system. With this, we've actually got 3 more agreements that we'll have to get finalized. One's an interconnection agreement, which will just define how we interface with their system. The other is an EEI agreement, which will allow us to do bilateral agreements with Ameren to purchase capacity and energy, which would be a good thing. And then the one final is actually a termination of agreement for our equipment in the Marion substation. That's metering equipment that was actually placed in 2017, 2018. So there's going to be a little bit of stranded cost with it. And so there'll be about a $200,000 payment to Ameren to cover the costs that they have at that site. And then we're going to wrap up the easement assignments, a part of this line, because there'll be some of the easements that they're acquiring that will give us rights. And in some ways at the terminal ends where it connects to the 74 line, we'll actually be assigning them some easement rights so they can get in there and do the construction that they need to do. Kind of a part of this, and Matt's going to be covering this a little bit in his operations report, but we'll actually be making an arbor connection at the Finn substation. But then our own projects will be building the line from the dead ends actually into Oakwood, and then Oakwood will actually have to be expanded and reconfigured to be able to receive the 161 feet in there. The one thing we're seeing is lead times on some of these items are 36 to 52 weeks out. Jared just went out and got some lead times for some of the major items actually at Oakwood substation. The 161 power transformer is about 58 weeks, which is a little bit longer than what we were thinking. We were hoping it would be under a year, but as we know with COVID and supply chain, some of that stuff's getting some longer lead times with it. 161 breakers are 36 weeks. Disconnect switches are 26 weeks. So, and that's about the shortest lead time we have on some of those items. So really kind of moving forward with some of these initiatives and getting the contracts in place is going to be really important. You know, as far as that goes, kind of moving forward, we really got bid packages that will be ready this fall. And so there's some of these items that over the next month or two will be the engineering design, or at least a preliminary engineering design will be finalized. The engineering design package for the 34.5 line that will actually be completing the loop is almost complete now and will most likely be a winter project after the first of the year. And then I think the one thing that the board sees on there is the liquidation of the generators. The one thing that we're seeing is that with the Oakwood substation, the expansion that's necessary, with the generator sitting there, it's going to add about $800,000 of cost to the project. And so the one thing we'll be talking about in the action items is trying to go out and see, you know, we were able to secure the capacity in the marketplace, which is quite a bit cheaper than the generators themselves. And with some of the projects, Ameren's got about 5 projects for generation that as this resource mix from a power supply standpoint changes, you know, from fossil fuel to renewables. Really, as we go through and look at these generators, there's a pretty good economic benefit for the customers to kind of look at surplusing them. It's going to save on the project cost. It's going to allow us to go out and look at other capacity options that might have a little bit better energy supply with it. And really what we're talking about is, I don't really want to call it saving money, but reinvesting about $5 or $6 million that would actually minimize the impact of some of these other projects, which may be able to allow us to get some of these projects in place without necessarily having to affect or do anything with rates, which is a really good thing for the customers. But the one thing that's still outstanding is that we've went through and really today we're going to kind of be seeking approval just to move forward with doing a competitive bid process to surplus the generators. If the bids come in where we think they're going to come in at, obviously it'll come back to the board to execute a sell agreement if that's the board's desire. You know, right now we've already confirmed there's no special actions from a tax perspective, and already kind of defining the process with the sale and the debt payoff, but still an RFP for the surplus still needs to be drafted. The one thing we're currently looking at that really from a disaster preparedness standpoint, you know, the backup for the water treatment plant generation is a key topic on this. But, you know, as we move forward, a new option would actually might meet those loads and that need a little bit better because it would actually be sized for the load at the water treatment plant. So this would actually create an item down the road to pay off that debt. If that's what's moved forward with is that there would be another board resolution that we'd have to draft and come back to the board with that would justify the sale, you know, of the assets. So kind of in summary, you know, when you look at all this, you know, with the 151 projects that's currently underway within the MISO market, about 1.4 billion is being targeted for this footprint. You know, there's about 11 baseline reliability projects out there. There's 129 other projects, and 11 are generation projects that's already got generator interconnection agreements with them. So, and when you hear about this, sometimes they're actually calling one of the projects the Hannibal line, but it's actually a part of that bigger project I was referring to, where it's kind of going from the Pino Spalding substation that's owned by Associated. It will actually work through the new fenced up substation that's owned by Ameren and go all the way to Hall, which is on the Illinois side. So really good project from a reliability resiliency standpoint. It would allow us to bring in energy into the community just about as much as we need, you know, with the capacity of it. So, but that whole project's kind of estimated at $30.3 million and expected to be in service by June 1st, 2022. And like I said, with this background, it's kind of worth kind of pursuing and seeing if we could reinvest the $5 to $6 million in these projects and get the reliability, the resiliency, and the cost effectiveness out of it. So that kind of highlights my, what I was wanting to kind of visit with the board and give them some background on some items. Obviously, down below, Paul will be updating everybody on the scheduled rates and fees. We've actually got the Financial Service Advisors Agreement that would be necessary to go ahead and do the financing on these projects. And he'll cover this, but we're kind of looking at all these projects put together is estimated about $11 million in financing. And then the one thing will be a reimbursement resolution. And what that will allow is the $1 million that would be paid to Ameren for the construction of our assets, which we will ultimately own, would take place in August. And then if the transformer, based upon these lead times, there'd be 10% of the transformers that would be necessary prior to maybe getting the financing in place. And what this resolution would allow us to do is reimburse our reserve funds with the financing proceeds. So it's kind of a housekeeping, record-keeping item. But really over the next 4 or 5 months, we're probably looking at about, $1.1 to $1.2 million of expenditures kind of with these projects that's in the budget and planned for. So kind of with those items, like I said, kind of big strategic initiatives that's going on, really good projects, got some really good economics with them and reliability and resiliency with them. So be happy to answer any questions, but we'll kind of talk a little bit more about these as we go through, and ask the board for action on some of them. So.
Any questions, fellas? No. I don't either.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that you done, Ken?
Yes, that wraps up my report.
Matthew Jones?
Afternoon, how are you all?
Very good, how are you?
Doing well. I thought I'd start out by just giving you a brief history of where we have been as far as meter reading goes, and then give you an idea toward the end here of some of the new enhancements that the AMI system is going to allow. So feel free to interject any questions or ask anything that you would like throughout. So decades ago, our staff employed many people to walk the town and manually pencil in monthly readings to report both electric and water meter reads. At that time, the town was segmented into reading routes to ensure ample time was given to each meter reader to complete the route, allow the bill clerk to manually enter readings into the customer information system, and then produce the monthly billing statement. Moving forward a few decades, in the 1990s, mobile electronic handheld units were deployed, which allowed our same meter readers to enter in readings into a device, which would produce an electronic file which was manually imported into our CIS system, which saved time and reduced human effort. In 2004, the decision was made internally to perform the first ever full meter replacement for both electric and water, and implement an automated meter reading system. This entire project was outsourced to a third-party contractor and was completed in just a little over 11 months. The system allowed for both water and electric meters to be read daily using a power line carrier system, which was to transmit readings from the electric meter to the office over the power lines. I will note that we were the first in the nation to actually try that. This new system would allow would compile meter readings and produce daily electronic files. The bill clerk would again manually import into CIS, producing monthly statements. Due to metering components being discontinued by suppliers, we made the decision in 2018 to move forward with research and planning to upgrade the AMR system to an advanced metering infrastructure system. Installation began in 2019 with the new electric meters and new registers and transmitters for water meters. These meters communicate via radio frequency to 11 different collection stations that canvass our service territory. Our electric and maintenance crews are involved with the installation of these 11 collectors. We made the decision to allow our members of electric, water, and metering departments to be deeply involved with the deployment of the equipment instead of outsourcing. This allowed us to educate our staff on this new system and also reduce overall costs, but it will stretch out the project a little longer than the previous install over 11 months. After the testing of these new meters and back office technology in 2019, mass deployment was scheduled to begin in the first quarter of 2020. However, due to the pandemic and the scaling back of field services, full installation did not begin until late spring. At this time, we're about 30% complete with the installation of the new technology for roughly 8,700 electric meters and 7,700 water meters based on current active agreements. The new AMI network enables the efficient and effective transport of information from the field into our office various systems and gives users access to some of the following. Billing and reporting to enable our customer service departments to better inform our customers, as well as having data passed along to our customers via Smart Hub, which, if you're not aware, is our online and mobile application where customers can interact with their accounts. We also have been able to allow customers to change billing cycles to better accommodate their personal needs, since we're getting readings coming in daily. This has also sped up our billing cycles. We used to bill 20 cycles. We're now down to 6 per month. We have also found a way to outsource our bill printing and bill stuffing, which we used to do internally every month as well, freeing up a lot of our billing staff's time. Some additional things, overall safety by utilizing the remote disconnect and connect features inside of all residential class meters, instead of sending crew members to the field. This feature also allows our CIS system to automatically reconnect a meter once the customer satisfies their delinquent account instead of sending someone to the field to reconnect that service. Our AMI system also allows us to perform what's called over-the-air upgrades to our meters, so we do not have to visit each meter to make any sort of parameter changes or metering changes. This is also going to allow us to prolong the use of the system and to keep our meters longer, in theory. We've also are in works of creating a centralized dashboard where internal users can get a glimpse of the overall system performance with the ability to investigate issues down to the single meter level. Some future things that we'll also have the option of implementing could be the outage management system to aid in mass restoration efforts. We would also have the ability to introduce water leak detection equipment, since water meters are sending hourly reads instead of just daily reads, to better pinpoint for our customers when that issue occurred, or to track that in a narrow window instead of 24 hours, maybe down to a smaller window. We would also have the option of installing voltage monitoring down to the meter level. Additional future components could also be installed to aid with transformer load analysis. AMI would also allow us the ability to add different rate plans for our customers, such as time of use or prepaid options, which are popular in larger utilities. But we feel that with having this metering in place, we'd have the ability to better offer our customers some different payment options that may better suit their budget. First AMR system we implemented in 2004 had a life expectancy of 10 years. So we were very fortunate to be able to continue to maintain that system until 2018. We feel that by continuing to invest in metering technology, we continue to provide better customer service, customer support, and make more efficient use of our entire workforce. So just a quick little overview. My plan is to also continue to give you some more information, whether it be email or in the board packets, on overall statistics, maybe show you some examples and some reporting and that sort of thing. There are some challenges that we have come into play that we are working with our vendors to hopefully overcome. But for the most part, I'm pleased with the progress that we're making. We've made great strides in the last month and a half with adding more of our internal crew to be able to go to the field and proceed with these meter exchanges. Thank you.
Your hourly metering thing helped me a lot in the last week. I've got a leak.
Oh, there you go.
Okay. Thank you, Matthew. Matt, I believe you're up.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
Just to update you on a few projects we have ongoing. Water side, we wrapped up the water plant project, so had one carbon change out and another one scheduled, so probably won't see it on the list much longer. Sewer side of things, working on chasing I&I through the Patches Street lift station area. We were able to move the crews over there and did a full cleaning and televising within the past month. We're in the process of reviewing that data and looking for some areas where we can make some improvements and get that groundwater or that runoff, keep it from entering the system, and preventing sanitary sewer overflows in that area. And then also Trek is continuing to work with their modeling subcontractor on the modeling of the system that we presented a couple months ago and you all approved. And so that once they get the model built, they'll be back up to do flow monitoring out in the system to validate that the model is accurate and we can use it moving forward with analysis of the system. On the stormwater side of things, Martin Street wrapped up with paving. With hopefully next month we'll have one final change order to go over with you all, adjusting all the quantities for the actual installed quantities, including the pavement. North Street and Union Street, PSBA is continuing to work on finalizing those final plans, and Union Street, the plan would be to have it out to bid later this summer. So,
Okay.
and then on the electrical side of things, as Ken alluded to, a lot of these projects tie together. We're going to tie Oakwood substation to the South Side substation. That will allow us some redundancy when we go to do this fin connection. It'll allow us to pull power in from the 73 line and bring it over to Oakwood sub. And then ultimately, once we get the 161 line constructed into Oakwood, it will allow us a redundant feed to what we have coming into the west sub. As Ken also alluded to, we're running into some long lead times on this fin connection, especially when it comes to transformer. And so hopefully within the next couple of weeks, we'll be able to go out to bid on that, get one selected and approved, and that way we can get it ordered because the price of materials are continuing to rise, and it also allows our engineer to finalize the design. As each manufacturer makes their transformer a little different, once we have that transformer selected, we're able to design some of the substation components around the actual selected transformers.
Very good.
That's all I've got. Unless y'all have any other questions.
Yep.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Matt.
If you guys, there was one item I was wanting to add, with the information of the Colonial Pipeline, and the cyber attacks, obviously that's hit more than just a pipeline. You hear about the city of Tulsa and a lot of other agencies being impacted. I just wanted to sit there and say that, Matthew and a lot of folks here have been kind of tracking that situation, trying to learn from what's been going on there. So obviously investment and cybersecurity and some of this stuff is something you can't take lightly. And last year and a half, you've had a lot of national events and they come close to home, whether that's the pandemic or Uri or whatever else. But obviously that's an item out there and a risk and exposure that you can't take lightly and put it as part of your contingency and your mitigation plans as much as we can. So obviously the information's coming out more and more where we can learn from it and hopefully, learn from other systems rather than your own. So anyway, just something that I wanted to highlight, and Matthew's doing a great job with it and keeping track of it and keeping an update on that item. So
That's
something really
under
important.
I noted the security enhancements, the network, basically is all that's all the hardware at this point.
Yeah, we're continuing to improve some of our internal hardware as well as some of our software to monitor external threats. So that unfortunately is a necessary evil that we have to all, in the IT world, attempt to defend.
Okay.
More so now than before.
Before last month even.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
yeah.
Thank you. Are you done there, Ken?
I am.
Okay.
Just wanted to wrap that one up.
Sure. No, appreciate that. Paul, you're up.
Okay, you're getting loud at me today. I hope that's okay.
We were teasing that he was going to need a seat or a stool. Bring it back.
I think I'll be all right. All right, we'll start off with finance report for the month of April before we get down into some of the other new business items. So looking at the balance sheet, like we always do, first off, unrestricted cash did go up again this month by about $409,000.
Really not much other changes in the balance sheet. Utility-wide, total assets were about 0.2% less than a month ago and about 0.5% higher than a year ago. So not much change there. Getting down into the income statement, looking at the current month actual compared to budget. Utility-wide net income was just about $100,000 or 38% less than what we had budgeted for April. Operating revenues were down about 11% in the electric fund, and purchase power costs were up about 8%, or 18%, excuse me. We keep talking about it, but really the last of the polar vortex still haunted us this month. What we do with our actual Prairie State costs is we pay an estimate every month, and then a month goes by, and then about 2 months after we do a true up for the actual costs that were recognized. And so obviously with that polar vortex that occurred there in February, that true up was much higher here in April than what we would usually have to pay. And so we can hopefully officially say that those costs have all ran through our financial statements, and the full impact has been felt. So really the water fund had another positive month. Again, lower operating expenses, just as we've been accustomed to seeing this entire fiscal year. The sewer fund also had a good month and exceeded its budgeted net income by about $42,000. So two positive trends there. Next page there is current month actual compared to the same month last year. Very similar, actually, only about a $15,000 difference. Kilowatt hour sales in the electric fund for April were up about 8% from the same month a year ago. And actually, when you look at it, that's a trend now of 3 straight months of increased kilowatt hour usage when compared to last year. February was obvious, but then that's continued on into both March and April. So just a trend to keep an eye out there for. And then year-to-date actual is the next page and compared to budget. So really with all the contingencies that we've seen so far in the electric fund, overall we're about $1.4 million or 45% behind where we budgeted. Electric fund in particular is about $1.6 million behind. And again, that's due to those higher purchase power costs. Right now they're about $915,000 over budget, or about 8%. And at the same time, revenues continue to lag significantly behind. This time last year, we had about 200 million kilowatt hour sales, and we're about 196.1 so far this year. So the water fund continues to remain very, very strong due to those lower operating expenses. And then the sewer fund is just a little bit less than budgeted on net income so far. So year-to-date actual compared to the same month last year, very similar. Net income is about 43% less than the same time period. And really that's just due to lower operating revenues overall and just a little bit higher operating expenses, but they're mostly consistent. So obviously it's been an odd year so far. We had the ice storm in January, significantly cold weather there in February, plenty of outliers that you just can't budget for really. Luckily, we do have that cash reserve policy in place. You know, we've talked about it over and over, that we had the excess funds on hand to be able to pay for those contingencies, and you know, it's a very good thing that we did. We've talked about this as well. We've seen a trend just overall of lower revenues. Did have a bit of a different trend in increased kilowatt hour sales these last 3 months, but overall revenues have been down. That's likely a sign of efficiencies out there in the market, which is, you know, a very good thing that customers are able to find that. Again, tons of uncertainty. We'll continue to monitor the budget closely, especially as we roll over into a new fiscal year here in just a few months. That's all I've got then on the financial statements for April. Unless there's any questions.
Paul, do you foresee the increases in purchase power to be kind of an ongoing trend, or is it going to mitigate after the February anomaly?
No, it'll definitely mitigate. You know, before everything, before the new year turned over, we were seeing a kind of a trend, a little bit in the opposite direction. Mm-hmm. You know, purchase power costs were coming in less. You know, I did go back and look, and through 2020, we were down. I can't remember the exact percentage, but yeah, and then everything kind of happened at once. Had all that cold weather that came in, and then the big fear factor, has kind of caused costs to still stay up just a little bit. They've definitely came back down. So it will be something to monitor, but I think all signs are kind of pointing towards that they'll eventually get back down to where they were.
The month of February was obviously an extreme anomaly, because of all the conditions. I think the one thing we're seeing on LMP prices, we're hoping to see between $19 and $21 a megawatt hour. It seems like more and more days are coming in between that $25 and $30 megawatt hour level. So we are seeing some ticks up. All the research that we've done and what we've looked into right now, it's still based on the scheduled outages that's going on. So there's a lot of generation out there that's getting ready for the summer months, which is causing these prices to be a little bit elevated than what we've seen historically. So I think once those resources are able to be dispatchable, hopefully we'll have a better idea on what the real costs are there. So natural gas prices, is really kind of one of the leading indicators, and it kind of ticked up, but it's kind of starting to stabilize around a $3 decatherm range. So hopefully that won't have a bad adverse impact on energy sales or energy costs. Hey, the one thing I was going to recognize Paul for, man, he's done an outstanding job. He's done a lot of work, and we've got the NISC system. There's so many things that we've implemented from a policy and utilization on the system side of things, and actually the asset tracking system is about fully operational. So some of the things that you're seeing here is assets getting capitalized and being depreciated. So when you kind of look there at the income numbers, some of that's non-cash items because it's already been dollars spent in capital investment. It's finally getting into the system and being depreciated. So that's the reason you're seeing some of the income levels that's being impacted by depreciation more so than anything. And then we're seeing reserve funding actually continue to increase, over this period of time. So there'll be a little bit of a reconciling difference between the prior year and this year just because of what we've done with the system. So, but I don't know if, but anyway, he's done a great job with it and got it all implemented. So that was a lot of work. So.
Any more questions? Okay, Paul, I think you're still up.
Yeah, and I was going to point out one other thing. We've got our normal items on there as far as the check register and dashboard. But I would bring your attention real quick here to page 21. I promised, I think that was last month or whenever we were going through that budget process, to add the debt service coverage ratio to the packet. And so there on page 21, about halfway down, you can see it added there. That's something we're all going to have to keep an eye on as a team. I've got on there for the water and sewer rows that the bond covenants require a 1.25 ratio. And that's something that we definitely don't want to violate. And really what the debt service coverage ratio is it's your net revenues, so your net income, which is your revenues less your expenses. Then you add back your depreciation and your interest, and then you divide that by your total debt service. And that basically tells creditors kind of how healthy you are as an organization or your ability to be able to pay your debt, essentially. And so what they say is you need to have a ratio there of 1.25 or that ability to be able to service your debt. And so you can see on there that we're all in the green right now, which is great. But if you recall, we did predict kind of a negative cash flow on hand at the end of the year for next budget year for the water fund. So we'll keep an eye on that, and I'll definitely make sure to point it out, if not on a monthly basis, on definitely a regular basis, just to make sure we're tracking along where we should be. And yep, I think that's it as far as the financial report goes. So if there's no other questions, then I'll move on to the schedule of rates and fees. I did want to do a little bit of an educational session here, just if we could, to make sure we're all on the same page. Don't know how much you guys have looked at any of these documents, but we've really, as a management team, spent a lot of time looking at them, and like Ken said, making sure everything's kind of at the market rate and where they should be. And so we are going to propose just a few changes. And when I do say changes, I do want to make sure that we're not changing any rates or anything like that. We've made that very, very clear. the only changes that will be made are more of internal type of user services that are provided and things like that. And so some of those have gotten out of date over the years. So we'll get started here on page 53. And basically, the schedule is called the Schedule of Fees and Charges. And as you're going throughout this document, you'll notice that it's redlined, which basically means it was that's the way it was before, and then the changes are in red that we're proposing. And so, looking at the Schedule of Fees and Charges there on page 53, the transfer fee there is established by the city charter. And essentially, you'll see that on every utility bill that we bill out. It basically is the right for us to provide utility services across city property. And so 5.5% of every single bill does go back to the city for that right. And that is the maximum amount that's allowed per city charter. Recycling fee, a bit of a similar manner. Recycling is a responsibility of the city to contract that out. And we are responsible for the collection process and then providing that fee on then to back to the city to contract that out to Two Rivers is who that is right now.
Can I stop you a second there? That was one of my questions. The city does the contracting then and the oversight?
Correct. Correct. Yeah. Our only responsibility is the collection of the fee, which is essentially just a pass through. We collect it and then pass it right on through back to the.
I guess the reason it comes up is the COVID stuff has affected that operation out there, and they don't accept plastic anymore, which is the biggest item for most people, and so our citizens have to go to Palmyra to dispose of plastic if that's what they're using. So I just wondered if there was oversight on that. So we don't do that. So.
Correct. Yep.
I was going to say James might be able to elaborate more. The manager for the recycling system itself testified in front of the city. I was not at that meeting. I was on vacation, so he might be able to provide a little more insight.
Sure. Basically, what you have to take into consideration is the fact that the voters decided it was appropriate to give a preference to entities that hire people who have special needs. And the problem being that what Two Rivers is running into is, and they presented us with some stuff that I think is probably pretty believable, based on government regulation that they've got. It's not a lack of desire to do some of these things. It's the way government is making them have their people deal with these recyclables, that they don't want them touching this, and they want this cleared out and that cleared out, and blah, 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 blah. So as a result, they're somewhat bound by the fact that they're dealing with special needs employees, which is something that the voters felt was very important to get this thing done.
Is that an absolute?
It's not. It's a preference. It used to be an absolute when they initially created the program. It was an absolute. It is now no longer an absolute. It's a preference. However, we opened it up for bids and nobody bid on it. The only people that bid were Two Rivers. So basically, because of the way the vote was done, they had to give them the contract. I don't know whether other entities don't feel that they can make money at where the rates are or what the problem is, but my understanding is that no one else submitted a bid, so it didn't even come into consideration. So it's a fee that's been voted in by the voters, and so there's probably an argument that even if Two Rivers wasn't doing it, we would be supposed to collect the fee no matter what, and then try to figure out what to do with the money at some later date. If we fired Two Rivers, we'd have to find a replacement, but it's my understanding that nobody's been very interested in taking on the contract at the rate being what it's supposed to be. So
There are other solutions to that. I'm just curious that, I guess the question is, are we looking at those, not in our neck of the woods, but is the city looking at those, including, contractors that would take that door at the curb?
The city opened it up to public bids. no one was interested in bidding on it as it's set up right now, other than Two Rivers. There is currently, negotiations going on with various trash haulers, et cetera, whether some part of that might be dealing with recycling also. I don't know. It's still all very speculative. I know that at least one trash hauler has come up with some information that they want to share with the city, and that's under proposal. The issue is the city gave the mandatory 2-year notice that at the conclusion of 2 years, they would take some action. So there's not a lot that can be done, quite frankly, until the conclusion of the 2-year passes. There was an initial notice period that turned out to be invalid because several haulers were left out. So the council voted a second time to do that and sent out a second set of notices. So that goes to January, something like that. So, we're basically only 4 or 5 months into it, but
I know
it is something that's under consideration and in negotiations with the haulers.
That's good. That's fine with it.
Yep, so that is $1.90 per month for that collection fee. And then just some general fees that are on there, your late payment penalty, service charge for disconnection, return check, return payment fees, some of those general items. The utility security deposit we'll talk a little bit more about. Ken alluded to the deposit policy that we're changing. And so that's the reason for the red line there. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. Then we get into some departments specific fees, and we can certainly reach out to Jared or Gene or any of the supervisors, Matt, even on the sewer side, for any more explanation that you might like for any of those fees. But really with the electric side, we've got our new subdivision fee, and that says to be determined there. That really depends on the situation. If you've got a new subdivision that's going in a very heavily wooded area or what have you, then there would be a different cost for something that's wide open and just based on the tree trimming required and things like that. And so those situations really depend on things like that. We do have a pole attachment fee on there, so we've got obviously electric poles all over town. Other entities are allowed to attach to those poles per contract, and so we do have a charge there for that per pole per year. Security light fee is on there, things of that nature. The water fund, there's a temporary disconnection, reconnection, basically a winterization type of fee. If you were to disconnect in the winter and leave and then come back in the spring and want your water turned back on. We've got some kind of pool filling specific fees. If you were to connect to a fire hydrant to use to fill your pool, there'd be a fee for that. And then the actual water usage from that, obviously, and some things like that. Water taps are one of the fees that this schedule was actually created in 2010, and the tap for water taps the fee, for water taps was not changed since that time. Obviously, there's been an increase since then in labor costs and materials, and what we assume there is about 4 labor hours and normal material costs for that. Sometimes things don't always go as planned, especially if it's a larger or construction type of service, and so we do put on there that actual costs will be billed based on labor and materials used, but the costs that we're proposing to increase there are definitely more in line with current labor rates and material rates for those water taps. And then the sewer side, we do charge septic waste hauler dumping fees for any waste that's hauled over to the wastewater treatment plant. We have surcharges on there for extra strength suspended solids and biochemical oxygen demand. Those are about 17.5 cents or 16.5 cents per pound. So anything that could be detrimental to our sewer system, we would charge a surcharge for that. And then one you see added on there is extra strength fats, oils, and grease. Same idea, not good for the system. Can cause a lot of work or failure in the long run, and so this is in there. just to make sure that it's monitored and kept in check. And then we've got sewer tap fee on there as well. And then a special rate for any business that has a cooling tower. Obviously, it would be assumed that there would be some of the water that goes into a cooling tower would be lost due to evaporation. And so it's not necessarily water in, sewer out. It wouldn't be equal. And so we do charge a special rate for that. And then over at our treatment plants, we do some bacteriological testing at the water treatment plant, and then at the wastewater treatment plant, we do some other specific testing that's on there as well. You do see a change there in our I can never say that word, biological oxygen demand, BOD. Yeah, a lot easier. Fee there, and I look back at that one, it hadn't been changed since about 2015 or 2016, and so we're increasing it to $30. We'll just round it out and get it in line with all the rest of them. So the next few items are the actual specific electric, water, and sewer rate schedules. This is what would actually be used to determine what your rate is as a business or as a residential customer. So we've got some general rate provisions that are on there that list out some of the definitions of what things are. You can see there a power factor correction on page 57. That basically is a measure of efficiency from the electrical side, and we really like customers, especially the larger ones, to, excuse me, this only applies to industrial customers. We like to see at least a 95% power factor, which is anything below that would potentially be detrimental to our system and could cause failures or extra maintenance and things like that. And so we do monitor that, and anything that we see that drops below that 95% is subject to penalty. And then we've got our residential rates on there. Again, you won't see any changes in any of these rates. And then our single phase, 3-phase commercial rates. And then when we get up into our industrial rates, basically what sets that industrial designation is based on the peak monthly energy demand for customers. And so we say that any customer with a peak demand of 100 kilowatts or more at any load factor would be subject to the industrial rate, or a demand of 50 kilowatts or more at a load factor in excess of 45%. So a lot of big words there. Really, when you talk about peak demand during the month, at the end of the billing cycle, when we go to bill the customer, their largest usage for a 15-minute segment during the month is what sets their peak demand. That's in kilowatts. And so we would look at that, and that would set the demand for the month. And so when you talk about load factor, that's essentially, how often that you've kind of stayed at that demand level. And so if you see a smaller load factor, you're more likely going to have real large peaks that go up like that, which isn't very, very good for the system or for the customer. You would much rather prefer a more level or smaller peaks. And so we try to monitor that, and we like to see higher load factors, obviously, for that reason. So then we've got large industrial service rate on there. Very, very similar, just a larger demand. And then our discount incentive program for our industrial customers, basically any new customers that qualify, or existing customers that introduce a new load are subject to these special incentive rates, and those are existent for the first 48 months of usage. We have to be notified within 90 days of the additional load, and the customer must have a minimum of 70,000 kilowatt hours per month of usage to qualify. And those discounts are listed there. Voltage and metering options. Basically, if the customer supplies their own transformer, there is a discount for that. Municipal and city service rates. You can see that we don't have any charge for the city departments that are listed there for their electric use, and then the charges for our actual HBPW locations as well. And then the last item on the electric schedule is the net metering service. Basically, any customer that were to offset the power provided to them with their own energy source, such as wind or solar, would have a kind of a separate rate there. We have a specific policy that lays all that out if any information is needed for that. Water and sewer rate schedules are going to be very, very similar. With the water rates, we have that discount and incentive program as well. Really, the main difference you're going to see is that there's only a residential rate and a commercial rate on the water side. We don't have an industrial rate at this time. And so those are all listed there. And then we, on page 63, we have a separate monthly customer charges based on meter size. Those are all listed there. Again, you're not going to see any changes in any of these fees at this time. Just more of a educational session for the board. Sewer is very, very similar to the water schedule. And so if we go all the way back then to the actual memo, basically, as Ken already said, any time per city charter, anytime there's a change to any kind of rate, fee, or anything of the like, we have to set a public rate hearing. And so that is something that we are asking for in the future whenever the board kind of deems fit. Since we're not changing any actual rates, there's no specific time frame when these need to go into effect, but we just wanted to get it in your hands for your review so you can kind of look it over and educate yourselves just at everything that we kind of do here at the BPW and charge for it. And so that's all listed there. Also, historically, all these schedules have been separate. So we've had a schedule of fees and charges, a separate electric rate schedule is separate. And so what we're proposing is an overall schedule of rates and fees, which will be a singular booklet or pamphlet or what have you that'll list everything out one after the other. And that'll make it a lot easier in the future when changes are made. We won't have to make sure a change that gets made to this policy gets made then to this one as well. It'll all be there in the same document.
And that's all posted.
That's all posted, correct. That's all on our website and very easily accessible. And then, whenever Corey has any need for it for potential customers, it'll all be there in one single booklet that he can use, or he can reference them to the website as well. So that would be the main change. And then obviously in there you saw the red lines of the some of the grammatical changes and things like that, and then some of those increases we had really to summarize. The main ones were the water taps, just increasing those specific fees to be more in line with current labor rates and material. And then there was the one BOD change on our wastewater treatment lab testing that was really for the same reason, just to get it more in line with current market levels. And so, we'll kind of let you talk about that, and we'll plan to set a rate hearing, whether it be, in July or later this summer or whenever you deem fit. We'll make sure to revisit this and get that set. And then once the rate hearing has been had and the public has had a chance to offer any comment, then we would go back to the board for official approval at that time.
The other thing I was going to add on this, the one thing we were trying to do, by charter and some of this, you actually have to do it at least 15 days and no more than 30, but, communicating and interacting with some of our major customers and, sometimes, anytime this schedule of rates and fees would be changed, you like to give them 6 months to a year, ability. So being planning ahead, recognizing that there's probably going to be rate increases, that's the reason with these electric projects. And some of the things we've been talking about is how do you minimize any rate impact, if any, so we've been trying to look at it overall to get a good fiscal plan as well as a financial plan in place. And then if rates would ever be necessary, to actually get out there and be ahead of the curve and communicate that to the customers so they could plan and budget and know that they were coming. And then by the time it hit the public hearing, they'd have a pretty good idea of maybe what the impact would be to them financially as well. So Obviously, like I said, no, there's no rate changes here. It's just a matter of getting some of the costs cleaned up and updated on it for specific services that's provided. But just kind of down the road when we're talking about that'd be something good so they could have it in their budgets.
So do we post that, say, in July, the potential changes so that industrial folks in particular can plan for that? How do we communicate that?
You know, I think that's one thing Paul and I've been visiting quite a bit about is actually having a budget and then a 5-year plan, you know, where each year something's rolling off and then that kind of becomes your budget and you tweak it as necessary. Sometimes when you're looking out, you might be able to see that you're running into a revenue need or something in year 3 or 4. You know, so that's one of those things you just kind of communicate to your plan, and then the closer it gets there, if it continues to materialize that way, or if you're not able to manage or prioritize costs differently, then they would actually know 24, 36, 48 months in advance, with that. So I don't know if that answers your question, Bill, but by the time you get to the budgeting period, by the time you get to year 3, and that's your current year, then people would have a pretty good idea.
I guess my question really is the exposure to the public of this document, first of all. I don't know if we have a hard copy newspaper requirement or we can just do that via the website. And is it by the end of the year? In other words, do we say, we're going to start to expose it in July and by the end of the year, we're going to promulgate it? Is that?
Well, I think it's definitely something we could put on the website and sit there and say, hey, here's our existing rate structures, and then go ahead and go out there. And then, the one thing is Michaela and Andrea and some of this will probably, anything that would impact a certain customer group, they would probably be out there kind of contacting them directly, and visiting with them. So, obviously the marketing awareness would be important, and then also, direct communication. That's one thing is even with COVID, actually reaching out to customers that may be most likely impacted, with the economy that's worked well. So, and I think this would be a very similar, approach. So.
And the biggest nuance we have to kind of worry about here, like Ken mentioned, is the 15-day requirement. So essentially the rate changes have to go into effect either within 15 days after the rate hearing and no more than 30 days.
Okay.
So obviously if you set a rate hearing, we'll say for July 15th, that would allow you to have those rates go into effect August 1st, or I guess there's 31 days. So you get what I'm saying. So that is a nuance that we have to kind of abide by per city charter. And the other thing with these particular changes is there's no actual rate changes, and so the impacts would be very, very minimal overall. Really with the water taps, those would be existing water taps going forward, and that kind of thing. Same with the lab testing and things like that. And so I think what Ken's getting at is, if you were to actually, set a rate change, you would really want to have extreme communication well ahead of time, because there's going to be a lot more to budget with that.
Okay.
So, no action at this time. We'll definitely plan to revisit it in the coming months, and we'll keep that in old business, definitely.
Okay.
Okay, Paul, you're still up.
All righty, we'll just keep trucking along here. So the electrical projects, we've talked a ton about them. Obviously, the financing piece is a very big portion and a vital piece to look at. So just kind of wanted to get this in front of you on what we've been looking at and researching and so far. And basically, everyone knows interest rates are extremely low right now in the current environment. We've had some pretty large contingencies there in the electric fund, and so we do expect to finance just as much of the project as possible. And so we do expect the financing to take the form of a certificate of participation lease agreement. We're looking at about a 20 to 25 year time frame on that, and the interest rate is approximately 2.5%. None of these numbers are by any means final at all. This is very, very preliminary. And in that discussion, obviously, we would look at to retain the services of WM Financial Strategies. Her name is Joy Howard. You might be familiar with her.
Yeah.
Her work in the past. We've been very, very pleased. Great to work with, as well as with Gilmore and Bell. Very, very intelligent folks. We've done a lot of work with them over the past few years, and so we'd like to continue to use their services with this financing as well. Based on the way everything's lining up, we would expect to close on this financing later this fall. And Ken mentioned it, but we do have that reimbursement resolution that you'll see attached here that allows us to pay that electric fund back within a period of 18 months after those funds are expended. So for any of those forward funds that would be expended before the financing was actually in place, we would have the ability to do that. So action at this time would just be to authorize usage of both Joy Howard doing business as WM Financial Strategies, and then Gilmore and Bell. And really the Gilmore and Bell agreements were for services that were performed in 2018. Those services that they offered then still apply now. So there's no actual separate agreement that we're needing or authorization that we're needing for that, but they are included here. And so we are looking for, at this time, just the board to authorize utilizing Joy Howard and her services, and then also authorization of that reimbursement resolution.
Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Paul, in your past experience, is this a common thing to go to bid or just use somebody you're comfortable with for these services?
Yeah, no, that's a very good question. The amount of knowledge that someone in that particular instance has is very, very helpful. And so having that background of the municipality and what to look for, you can't really quantify that, is I guess what I'm saying. And I don't know how long, but Joy has been working with us for years and years and years, from my understanding. And so it is difficult to quantify that. But as far as, we could definitely exercise if that would.
I got zero experience in this, and you've got many, many, many years, and I just wanted to get a flavor for the competitiveness of this stuff. It's not a huge consulting fee, and it is super specialized, I know. But, I just wanted to get your feel on it. I have no problems with using who you're comfortable with.
Oh, sure. And I know the city uses Joy as well. So it's definitely something we could consider. And
Couple of things real quickly. Normally in a situation like this, you don't take stuff like this out for bid. You do an RFQ, request for qualifications. The second issue to take into consideration is that Hannibal is not a low bid city, but a best bid city. So you are allowed to take into consideration your past dealings with people, et cetera, et cetera. And I would second that Joy is excellent and very particular in regards to things. She's very knowledgeable both about the financial aspects, but also about the way that the legalities of these types of financing deals work into the financial things. She's been excellent in the past. That's not to say that there aren't additional people out there that might also be excellent, but probably rather than taking it out for bid, if you were going to go that route, you'd probably want to do an RFQ.
Yeah, I just wanted to get a flavor for it. Sounds fine here. If there's a second needed, I'll definitely second.
Okay. All in favor?
Yeah.
All right. Motion passes. Paul, I think you're still up.
okay. Pardon me. Make sure we hit everything here. Okay, so that knocked out two items at once. That's what was throwing me off there. Last item on here is the surplus of the diesel generators. Ken's already talked a lot about this, and I've written a pretty lengthy memo there that really lays out all the background involved. And some of the highlights with that is, a municipality or utility at any one time is required to meet a certain load for its customers. And we talked about what that load was earlier. And so at any one time, if every single one of our customers were to operate at their peak demand, we would have the ability to provide that power to them. And so what that comes out to be on the MISO market is about 107% of your peak load from the prior year. And so for this next planning year, that's come out to be about 58.7 megawatts, which back in 2017, it was about 62.3 megawatts. And so we have seen a bit of a decline in that load over the past 4 or 5 years. And so that is one factor to consider. But so when it comes to meeting that 58.7 megawatts, you really want to treat it like an investment portfolio and meet that requirement with various resources. And so obviously, you know that we have 20 megawatts contracted through Prairie State. 16.4 megawatts comes from the generators over here. And then the rest of that is garnered or taken from the MISO marketplace, which is basically power that's been generated elsewhere and then has been sold back onto the market to then be sold to the end user, which in this case would be us. So there is a capacity auction every year that sets the price for how much that capacity power is going to cost on the market. And historically, the cost has been a little bit volatile, but very, very low. And so what we saw in 2014 and 2015 were costs in Zone 5, which is the zone that Hannibal belongs to, of 51 cents and 11 cents per kilowatt month, respectively. In 2016, though, the auction actually cleared at $2.19 a kilowatt month, almost a 2,000% increase. Definitely something that we would call a spike. But because of this, a financial analysis was performed, rightfully so, with any kind of increase of that size. And so basically what we looked at the time was the feasibility of offsetting capacity with our own behind-the-meter generation. It was decided that those costs were probably going to continue. The trend was what we projected at the time was going to continue to increase significantly. You can look on here, we had projected about a 69% increase in year one, and then between 4 and 8% for the 9 years following that. All this data that we had at the time was backed by an engineering firm called Leidos Engineering, and basically confirmed that those capacity prices were likely going to increase. So we looked at diesel generation, we looked at some other avenues, did some homework there, and we determined that diesel generation would cost about $2.33 a kilowatt month. So compare that to $2.19 for that year. You're getting pretty consistent there. So the decision was made to go ahead and purchase diesel generation, and that's what we did. Since that time, the diesel generators have cost about $541,000 a year. It's about $2.75 a kilowatt month, so a little bit higher than what we projected. Long story short, if you look at the table there on page 80, the auction price in the years following that huge spike has come right back down. You can see there was 5 cents immediately the year following, 30 cents, 9 cents, 15 cents, and then for this next planning year, it's 15 cents again. And so yes, we had a spike there, and so that's what caused us to buy the general diesel generators at that time. And then, you know, Ken has alluded to it many times, and we've talked about it. Obviously, with these new electric projects that are coming up, there would be a need to move the generators, which would be a significant expenditure, anywhere from $800,000 to $1 million to do that, which is extensive. And then, you know, another issue comes into play with environmental standards. You know, fossil fuels right now are under some pretty heavy scrutiny. And so we've seen programs here, you know, offering to pay for people to retire their fossil fuel generation and things like that. And so that's just another factor. You put all that together, and essentially owning diesel generation is no longer in the best interest of the city of Hannibal. And so we do recognize the importance of diversification And so we are looking at numerous other options of renewable sources and things like that to kind of supplement the contracts we already have in place. But obviously, right now, we'd like to take advantage of the very, very low capacity market price and use that for what we can. And so we'll continue to look at those options and renewable sources going forward. But essentially, displacement of the generators will allow us to put the approximately $4 million or so that's still owed on the lease towards our upcoming electric projects. It would alleviate the issue of needing to relocate them. It would also free up about 20 megawatts of power that could be potentially reinvested in low-cost renewable energy sources that would further diversify our portfolio. So really, Ken's already talked about it quite a bit, but at this time, we're only requesting that the board authorize us to move forward with that surplus and going through that RFP process to be able to generate or receive bids for the purchase of those generators. So we've got all the data and everything is there. And so any questions you have, feel free to reach out. But at this time, that's what we're requesting that the board authorize.
In effect, we're just testing the market to see what return.
That's exactly
we get.
right.
Can I make a question?
Sure.
Your $541,000 operating cost, is that to service the debt?
That includes debt service, O&M,
And then maintenance of the generators annually?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then do you feel that by selling the generators, that you'll at least pay off the debt?
Oh, you mean what's owed on it?
Yes.
Yeah, that would be the plan. Would be to use those proceeds in whatever. Yeah, it's in here, but we did go. We've had a couple folks that have come in interested parties, I guess, and have provided some soft bids, if you will, and kind of before they went back and plugged all their numbers in and everything, and we do anticipate, or we've seen that there's a market for them. It's definitely well outside the realm of public power, but there's definitely still a market. And so we do fully anticipate that those proceeds would be used to pay off the lease. And if not, we would use if for whatever reason the actual bids did come in lower, we would have that discussion at that time of what to do moving forward.
I guess what I was looking for was that you won't owe on something that you won't have any longer.
You want to be upside down.
Oh,
I want to be upside down.
no matter what, yeah, we would definitely have to pay off that lease, no matter what. Yep.
Well, it
And really,
like
that's what
you're-
we're trying to confirm with the RFP process, just to make sure.
Sounds like what you're kind of not exactly proposing, but saying more years go down the road, the less valuable they're going to be. So even if we are upside down a little bit on the short term, it'd be worthwhile making a move quicker to be less upside down in the future. That's the way it kind of seems. So I'm definitely for it. So.
That's what we've gone full circle, because I remember sitting here when they were such a good idea, and now all of a sudden we're turning around and we're disposing.
Yeah, go ahead.
The one thing is with power supply, I think that's one thing when I was starting at the beginning of the board meeting was, these are some pretty big strategic decisions, whether it's reg making or power supply. And a lot of things are changing drastically in the power supply market. I mean, you're seeing a move away from fossil fuel. You're seeing some of these projects come about. We've actually received proposals on some other natural gas turbines that could go even maybe into a hydrogen type of environment. So there's a lot of opportunities that's probably going to be developed, over the next few years through the technology changes and changing the mixture of power supply portfolio in general. I think that's one thing we've tried to do is go out there and see what the market prices would be like for capacity, see what the market prices are like for the generators, and kind of forecast out a little bit to see, what's the best overall economic decision without losing anything from a resiliency and reliability standpoint. Right now, the $1.3 billion that's kind of being invested in the MISO market a little bit is all about enhancing resiliency and reliability and actually being able to bring additional power supply where you don't have the transmission constraints as well. So a lot of time, effort, and work's being done within the industry that, I think we just got to stay aware of and making sure that we're adjusting as necessary. And some of these decisions. It's hard to sit there and say as fast as the industry's changing that the decision today is going to last you 8, 9, 10 years because the marketplace is changing quite a bit. And even on pricing the capacity, you know, we went out and got bids for about 2 to 3 years out, and it went up to about 50 cents. You know, we didn't think that was necessarily the most prudent decision to do with the circumstances we were in, so we waited and just participated in the MISO auction, and it came in around 15 cents that we updated the board on. So, but the longer you go out, the more you're going to pay for that risk or that exposure that the power supply has. So, really, anyway, and kind of talking about the projects, you know, it's kind of a reinvestment of dollars from actually behind the meter generation to really transmission and infrastructure on that point. So,
If I could, Mike, when you were here and they were talking about doing it and then decided to do it, was it more an issue of what if the world goes dark and we'll have at least some lights, or was it more what if this power peak in price comes and we have to have a backup to save money?
It was covering the peak prices.
Okay.
So it was more a financial decision. More of a hedge on you know, keeping the power rates, you know, stable. And I don't know, just looking at a 5-year chart on natural gas, you know, looking at the trend line, you're right at a trend line now where it's only spiked 3 times in the last 5 years over present price. So you know, you don't have a crystal ball on it.
yep,
Yeah,
we really don't.
Yeah.
And this would just be an authorization to seek bids, correct?
That's right.
So this isn't the actual,
Not
The
the sale of silver word.
Just a really important decision. We just wanted to make sure the board and everybody was very comfortable with it, you know, as we move down and do our due diligence. So,
we have a motion. Do we have a second?
yes, second.
All in favor? Aye. Feel free to pursue that, Paul.
Okay, and then, you know, this probably isn't necessarily necessary at this time, but we wanted to go ahead and ask you to approve using Gilmore and Bell to assist with the payoff of that lease, should we get to that point. And the reason we want to do it well ahead of time is, one, he's proposing $1,000 to do this, and this is the same gentleman that worked on the initial financing, and so this would give him plenty of time essentially to work on it and make sure everything's ready ahead of time, and the information that he would need are really just the final dates that everything were going to fall in place. And so by authorizing him to do this, it just gives him kind of a head start to be able to do some of that. Obviously, if we didn't end up going that route, then his services wouldn't be needed. And I don't know if we would pay the full $1,000 or if it would be a kind of a prorated cost, but $1,000 for an attorney basically means he knows that he's not going to spend much time on it. And so we would ask that at this time that the board go ahead and authorize using Gilmore and Bell as our bond counsel to do the payoff of the lease.
Yeah, I'd make that motion, definitely.
What's that?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Yeah.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Ken, you're back up again.
you know, really this is one of those items that we kind of covered during the general manager's report, but it's the Ameren construction agreement. And effective what's in the construction agreement is our obligation to pay or reimburse Ameren for the facilities that we're going to ultimately own. And so they're going to be constructing actually 6 facilities that will be property of Hannibal Board of Public Works. And then the conductor all the way from the Finn substation will be owned by HPPW all the way to Oakwood. And so all the terms and conditions have really been worked out. You know, right now, I wish I had a finalized agreement. There was a few things that we requested to be clear on construction responsibilities versus ownership responsibilities within the agreement. They went back through and looked at it, recognized that there were some gaps or holes, recommended the changes to go back to their attorney. And so their attorney's actually drafting, it's actually just Appendix A of defining Hannibal responsibilities versus Ameren's responsibilities. So really the agreement's in condition to be signed. And it matches up to everything we've been requesting. It matches up to everything that Ameren needs as well. And the one thing that they're wanting to do is be able to finalize the agreement by June 1st, because they've got to go back to their board June 15th or 16th to receive full authorization to commence on the entire project. So this is one of their to-do items that they wanted to wrap up and done. I've kind of provided that agreement to James and you guys as well. And so really what we're seeking for is once we get that verbiage back, we'll go through the review process. And then in the past, the construction agreements have been signed by the general manager, and just looking for authorization to go ahead and execute that agreement, once the language looks like it meets our expectations. So be happy to answer any questions about the arrangement and stuff, but there's actually the construction agreement, which is part one, really of getting it done. And then we're going to have a joint use agreement, and then that's going to cover the facilities that we'll actually be attached to and be utilizing with the line coming into Hannibal. And like I said, this will displace the 34.5 line, which is called the 74 line. It'll allow us to retire the 73 line. And when this construction's all done, wholesale distribution services will actually be eliminated by about $400,000. So really allows us to replace aging infrastructure, expand capacity, actually mitigate risk, because the Marion substation where we're being fed out of is in a floodplain where Finn will not be. So so those are all the benefits that's going to come out of this agreement. And we're just kind of finalizing the responsibilities. So that's kind of what's here on the item today.
Motion to move forward with the agreement?
Yeah, second.
All in favor? Aye. You are good there, Ken. James?
I have no additional comments.
Okay, thank you. Any general discussion? Hearing none. Bill, would you like to make a,
Pursuant to section 610.021312 of the Missouri Sunshine Law, the meeting shall convene in closed session to discuss personnel and contracts, admitting members, all members, Ken Reesner, Matt Mutzlinger, Matthew Jones, Jared Stewart, Paul Trahale, Beverly Stewart, Courtney Harris,
And city attorney.
and city attorney.
I'll second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, folks.
Thank you very much.
Sorry I was late again.